Omega found Alpha King surrounded by dying stars, only to watch one bind itself to her shadow. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Alara Hayes stood at the edge of the observation tower, staring at the stars overhead. The night sky was unusually quiet, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Above her, the stars flickered weakly, their once bright glow dimming with every passing second. The people of the Astrix realm believed the stars were the souls of the first wolves, a link to the ancient kings and queens who had ruled the land long before. But tonight, the stars were fading, a sign of something terrible approaching. Alara's breath caught in her throat as she glanced over her shoulder at the grand city below. The streets of Solara, once bustling with life and laughter, now stood still, enveloped in an eerie silence. She was alone in this quiet place, isolated from the world around her. As an Omega, she had always felt out of place among her pack. Her people were strong, powerful, alphas and betas, those who commanded respect. And then there was Alara. She had no wolf spirit to call her own, no connection to the land that others held dear. Her status as an Omega marked her as weak, a shadow in a world of wolves who thrived on strength and dominance. She was nothing more than an afterthought, a mere servant to the pack's greater needs. But tonight, as the dying stars above her flickered like dying embers, something stirred within her. Something ancient, something powerful. A light, almost imperceptible, began to shimmer in her chest, a quiet pulse that echoed the dimming stars. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, her breath misting in the cold air. She didn't know why she was here, why she was drawn to this spot, but she couldn't ignore the pull. The stars above seemed to call her, their fading light beckoning her to the edge of the world. Suddenly, a flash of light streaked across the sky, and Alara's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just another star fading, it was something much more. A falling star, brighter than the rest, crashed to the ground just outside the city's boundaries. Alara's instincts screamed at her to go after it, to discover what lay beyond the boundaries of her pack's laws, beyond the life she had always known. Without hesitation, she started running, her feet pounding against the stone path as the night air whipped past her. The city, with all its noise and judgment, was left behind as she ventured into the wilderness. The light of the dying star guided her steps, pulling her deeper into the woods. The scent of pine filled the air, mingling with the cool earth beneath her feet. She was no longer the weak Omega she had once been. There was something new in her, something awakening with each step she took. As she approached the crash site, she saw a figure lying on the ground, cloaked in darkness. It was a man, tall and imposing, his body draped in a tattered cloak that seemed to shimmer with a strange energy. His face was hidden in the shadows, but Alara could feel the power radiating from him, a presence unlike anything she had ever known. Her heart raced as she knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch his shoulder. The moment her fingers made contact with his skin, a surge of energy shot through her, her entire being vibrating with the force of it. The man's eyes flickered open, revealing silver eyes that glowed in the dark like the dying stars above. His lips parted, but no words came out. His gaze locked onto hers, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Alara could feel her heart beating faster, her breath coming in short gasps as an undeniable connection washed over her. The dying stars had led her to him. She didn't understand why, but she knew, deep down, that this moment was more than just coincidence. He was here, and so was she, for a reason. And as the stars above continued to fade, one of them seemed to bind itself to her shadow, connecting them in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Alara's breath came in shallow gasps as she knelt beside the fallen man. Her fingers still tingled from the touch, the energy pulsing through her like a second heartbeat. The world around her seemed to fade away, leaving only the eerie glow of his silver eyes staring up at her, a silent plea for help. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her thoughts. Who was this man? And why did he feel so familiar? The air around them crackled with a strange energy, one that sent shivers down her spine. The stars above them continued to dim, their light flickering like the last whispers of a dying flame. She couldn't look away from him, his presence drawing her in with an irresistible force. Her heart pounded louder in her chest as she took in his features, a strong jawline, high cheekbones, and dark hair that fell messily around his face. His clothes, tattered and worn, seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly aura. Alara's mind raced. Who was this man? And why was he here? Why was he lying on the ground in the middle of the forest, surrounded by dying stars? She leaned closer, her hands hovering over his chest, unsure of what to do. As much as she wanted to run, to leave the situation behind, something inside her urged her to stay. She had always been a shadow in the pack, never seen, never heard. But now, in this moment, with him lying before her, she felt something stir within her, something deep, something ancient. Her hands moved instinctively, reaching out to touch his skin once more. This time, as her fingers brushed against his, the surge of energy that coursed through her was even stronger, overwhelming her senses. A vision flashed before her eyes, a vision of a powerful kingdom, a throne of black stone, and a man sitting on it, crowned in shadow. The image was fleeting, gone as quickly as it had come, but it left her breathless. What was that? She pulled her hands back, heart racing, but before she could retreat, the man stirred. His silver eyes opened wider, and for a moment, she saw something. Recognition? A flicker of understanding passed between them, as if he knew something she didn't. She opened her mouth to speak, to ask him who he was, but before the words could leave her lips, he spoke first, his voice hoarse and low. You are not like the others. His words sent a chill through her, as if they carried a weight far heavier than she could comprehend. Who are you? Alara whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. The man's lips parted, but no sound came out. He was struggling to speak, his body weak, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Alara's heart clenched with an unexpected wave of empathy. She had never been good with emotions, never been able to connect with others in the way her pack did. But something about this man, something about the way he was looking at her, stirred something deep within her. She moved closer, kneeling beside him once more. Please, she whispered, what happened to you? His gaze flickered to the sky above, his eyes scanning the fading stars. They are dying, he said softly, his voice barely audible. The stars, they are all fading. Alara looked up at the sky, her gaze following his. The stars were indeed dimming, their once bright light now flickering like dying embers. What does that mean? She asked, her voice trembling. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed his eyes, his face contorting in pain as if the weight of his words was too much to bear. It means, my time is running out. His words hung in the air, heavy with an unspoken truth. Alara felt a chill wash over her, the gravity of his words sinking in. What was this man, and why was he here? What was his connection to the dying stars? And what did he mean when he said his time was running out? The air around them seemed to thicken, the quiet night pressing in, as if waiting for something. Alara's heart raced, her thoughts spinning. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't leave him here. Not now. Not when there was something more to this, something she couldn't quite grasp, but felt in her bones. She reached out again, this time placing her hand over his heart, feeling the weak but steady beat beneath her palm. As she did, she felt something stir within her, a strange, unexplainable connection, like the stars themselves were pulling her toward him. The bond between them was undeniable. She didn't understand it, but she felt it, deep in her soul. And somehow, in that moment, she knew she couldn't turn away. Not from him, not from this. The stars were dying, but something else was beginning, something new, something powerful. And it was all tied to her, to him, and to the shadow that had bound them together. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken words. Alara could still feel the pulse of his heartbeat beneath her hand, strong but uneven, like a fading drumbeat in a storm. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew one thing. She couldn't leave him. Not now. Not after the strange connection she felt, as though something deep inside her was waking, something ancient and powerful, pulling her toward him. What do you mean your time is running out? she asked again, her voice a soft whisper, almost afraid of what he might say. His eyes fluttered open, the silver in them glowing faintly as he looked up at the sky, his gaze lost in the distant stars. They are dying, he repeated, his voice barely more than a rasp. And with them, so is the kingdom. So am I. Alara's heart skipped a beat. The words hung in the air, heavy with an ominous weight. What do you mean, so are you? She asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. He turned his head slowly to meet her gaze, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips, though it was quickly replaced with a grimace. I am bound to them, he said, his voice full of weariness. The stars, the light. Without them, I cannot survive. My soul, my power, is tied to theirs. Alara's mind raced, her thoughts swirling like a storm. He was talking about his life force, his very being, intertwined with something that was fading. But who was he? The man lying before her was no ordinary man. His aura was unlike anything she had ever encountered, a strange mix of power and darkness, like the storm clouds before a thunderstrike. The way he spoke, the way he carried himself, it felt as though he were royalty, or something even older, something beyond the reach of mere mortals. Who are you? She asked again, her voice almost a plea. He didn't answer immediately, instead closing his eyes as though the question pained him. I was once the Alpha King, he murmured, his voice distant, as if he were lost in a memory. Rowan Blackthorn, ruler of the Northern Territories. Alara's breath caught in her throat. The Alpha King? She had heard stories, of course. Rumors whispered in hushed voices about a king who had once united the packs of the North, a king whose power was unmatched. But those were just stories, legends passed down through generations. To think that this man, this stranger, was the Alpha King himself, the ruler of the lands, the one who had once commanded the stars themselves. It was almost too much to believe. You're the Alpha King? She asked, disbelief creeping into her voice. He nodded slowly, his gaze distant, as though the memories were too painful to revisit. I was, he said quietly, his voice tinged with sorrow. But I am no longer what I once was. The curse, the dying stars, have taken everything from me. My power, my kingdom, my purpose. Alara's heart ached as she listened to his words. She could see the pain in his eyes, the weight of his loss, and for the first time in her life, she felt a deep sense of empathy for someone else, someone whose suffering was so far beyond her own. How do you know it's too late? She asked, her voice soft, hesitant. Rowan's gaze flickered to hers, his silver eyes gleaming in the dim light. Because I have watched it happen, he said, his voice low, filled with regret. I have watched the stars fade one by one, and with them, my strength fades as well. Alara felt a chill run through her at his words. The dying stars, the curse he spoke of, it was all too much to comprehend. But there was something else in his voice, something she couldn't quite place. Is there nothing that can be done? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rowan's eyes softened, the flicker of pain in them deepening. Perhaps there is one way, he said slowly, his gaze dropping to the ground as though he were weighing the decision in his mind. But it is dangerous. It could cost everything. Alara's pulse quickened. She didn't know what he was talking about, but she could feel it, the weight of his words pressing on her chest like 1,000 invisible hands. What is it? She asked, her voice urgent, almost desperate. Rowan hesitated for a long moment, his eyes meeting hers once more. I must bind myself to someone, he said, his voice heavy with meaning. Someone who can restore the balance, who can bring the stars back to life. Someone who can save me. Alara's heart skipped a beat. Bind himself? Restore the stars? The words were foreign, impossible to understand, yet something inside her stirred as if they were meant for her. She didn't know how, didn't know why, but she could feel the pull, the connection between them, growing stronger with every passing second. She was the one he was talking about. She didn't need him to say it for her to know. The stars, his power, his life, it all rested on a choice. A choice that was somehow hers to make. Alara felt the weight of his words settle around her, the air thick with the gravity of his confession. She had always been taught to be practical, to look for solutions grounded in the world she knew. But this was something else entirely. She was being asked to believe in something beyond her understanding, beyond everything she had ever known. Bind herself to him, to an Alpha King whose power was fading with the stars. The thought both terrified and exhilarated her, the possibility of saving him somehow drawing her in, making her heart race faster than ever before. But there was no denying it. She felt it, deep in her bones. Something ancient, something beyond the world of wolves, whispered to her that this was meant to be. Rowan's silver eyes watched her carefully, his gaze unwavering, waiting for her response. The tension between them was palpable, thick with the unspoken weight of what his words meant. "Do you trust me?" he asked softly, his voice almost too quiet to hear. Alara's heart pounded as she considered his question. Trust. It was a word she had never truly known, at least not in the way most people did. She had been cast aside her entire life, never trusted, never seen. But this was different. For the first time, she was being asked to trust someone else, to believe in something beyond herself. The idea of binding herself to him, of stepping into a fate she had never imagined, was terrifying. And yet, there was something in his eyes, something in the way he held her gaze, that made her feel like she had no choice. It was as if the universe itself had conspired to bring them together, to offer her a chance at something bigger than anything she could have dreamed. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill her lungs. She could feel the pull of the stars above, the strange connection between her and Rowan, growing stronger with every second. She didn't understand it, but she knew it was real. It was her destiny, tied to his in a way she couldn't explain. Slowly, she opened her eyes, her gaze meeting his once more. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I trust you." Rowan's face softened, a hint of surprise flickering across his features. It was as if he hadn't expected her to say yes so easily, as if the weight of his words had been too much for him to believe in himself. But there it was, the moment of truth. Alara had chosen, and in that choice, everything changed. She could feel the energy shifting between them, the bond beginning to form, the stars above them flickering like the spark of a fire reigniting after years of dormancy. Rowan's hand reached out slowly, trembling slightly, and Alara instinctively took it. The moment their skin touched, she felt it, a surge of power, of life, rushing through her veins, filling her with something she had never experienced before. The bond was real, and it was only just beginning. Rowan's voice, once again low and filled with the weight of 1,000 years, spoke. "We must hurry," he said, his grip tightening on her hand. "The stars are fading faster than I can stop them. And with them, my life. If we do not act now, it will be too late." Alara nodded, determination flooding her body. She didn't know what was coming, didn't understand the full extent of what she had just agreed to. But one thing was clear, she would not let him fade. Not when she had the power to stop it. Not when their fates were now intertwined in a way that couldn't be undone. The bond between them had been forged, and now they had a destiny to fulfill. Together, they would fight for the stars. Together, they would fight for life. Rowan's silver eyes met hers one last time, filled with an intensity that matched her own. "Are you ready?" he asked. Alara's heart raced, her breath steadying as she nodded. "I am." And with that, they turned toward the darkness ahead, toward the unknown, toward the future they would face together. Alara could feel the power surging through her, an electric pulse that had become so familiar, yet so new. Rowan's hand was warm in hers, and as they walked deeper into the forest, the bond between them seemed to grow stronger, as if it was pulling them toward something. The stars above were still fading, their light dimming with each passing second, but Alara could feel the shift within her. She was no longer the girl who had been cast aside by her pack, the weak Omega who had never been seen. She was part of something bigger now, something that had the potential to change everything. Rowan was leading her through the trees with a determined pace, his eyes never leaving the sky. His steps were sure, but his breathing was shallow, as though the energy he was expending to stay alive was taking its toll on him. He had said that the stars were dying, that his life was bound to their light, and Alara could sense the urgency in his every move. She could feel it too, the weight of what was at stake. "How much time do we have?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with concern. Rowan's eyes flickered to her for just a moment before he turned his gaze back to the fading stars. "Not much," he said, his voice rough, as though the words pained him. "I can feel it. My connection to them is weakening. If we don't act soon, it will be too late." Alara's grip tightened on his hand as they moved through the dense forest, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't fully understand what Rowan meant by binding himself to her, or what the cost would be, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let him fade. She couldn't let the man she was now bound to die. They came to a clearing in the forest, the air around them thick with the scent of earth and pine. The moon above was hidden behind a blanket of clouds, casting the world in shadows. But the ground beneath their feet seemed to hum with life, the very earth alive with ancient energy. Rowan stopped at the center of the clearing, his eyes scanning the ground before him. "This is it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The place where it began. The place where we must reconnect." Alara looked around, her heart racing. She didn't know what Rowan meant, but she trusted him. For the first time in her life, she wasn't questioning her place in the world. She wasn't the Omega who had been cast aside. She was part of something. She was part of him. Rowan knelt down slowly, his fingers brushing the earth as though he was searching for something buried deep beneath. Alara followed his lead, kneeling beside him, feeling the warmth of the ground beneath her. For a moment, there was silence, a quiet that felt heavier than anything she had ever experienced. Then, Rowan's voice broke through the stillness. "This is where the stars were once born. The energy here is old, older than the Pax, older than the moon itself. It is the source of everything, the light, the power." Alara looked at him, confused. "But the stars are dying," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "How can this be the source if they're fading?" Rowan's gaze met hers, and there was a sadness in his eyes, but also a flicker of something else, hope. "Because," he said softly, "we are the ones who can bring them back." Alara's heart skipped a beat. The weight of his words settled on her like a heavy cloak. She had known there was something important about this, something bigger than herself, but hearing him say it aloud made it feel real. This wasn't just about saving him. This was about saving everything. The stars, the balance of their world. And she, Alara, was the key to it all. Rowan extended his hand toward her, his silver eyes reflecting the faintest trace of moonlight that broke through the clouds. "You must trust me," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "This bond, this connection between us, it's the only way. If you are willing, we can bring them back." Alara looked into his eyes, her breath catching in her throat. She had never been the one who was chosen. She had never been the one to make a difference. But now she was. She was the one who held the power to save everything. She nodded, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "I'm ready," she said. And in that moment, she felt it, the shift in the air, the pull of something ancient and powerful. The stars above them began to flicker once more, their light slowly returning, and with it, the promise of something greater. Together, they would save the stars. Together, they would save their world. Alara stood with Rowan, her heart racing as she felt the energy around them intensify. The earth beneath her feet seemed to hum with life, the very ground pulsing in rhythm with her own heartbeat. She had agreed. She had chosen to trust him, to bind herself to him and the fate that awaited them both. The stars above them flickered weakly, but there was a spark of something new, a flicker of hope, beginning to glow within the vast emptiness of the sky. Rowan's hand, still warm in hers, was steady despite the overwhelming weight of the moment. He had been the Alpha King, a ruler bound to the stars and the power they held. Now, he was a shadow of that power, a fading king who had placed his trust in her, the Omega who had never been given a second glance by anyone in her life. And yet, here they were, bound together in a way that neither of them fully understood. "Are you ready?" Rowan's voice broke through the silence, his gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that seemed to see through her. Alara nodded, her breath steadying as she squeezed his hand. "Yes," she whispered, the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest, but she didn't falter. She was ready. The moment she spoke, the ground beneath them trembled. A soft, vibrating hum filled the air, and Alara could feel it deep in her bones. It was the same sensation she had felt earlier, when the stars had begun to fade, when the power between them had first awakened. This time, it was different. The energy was stronger, more alive, more intense. Rowan closed his eyes, his face a mask of concentration as he reached out with his other hand, his fingers brushing the earth beneath them. "Focus," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. We must connect with the source. We must restore the balance. Alara followed his lead, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. She felt the pull of the stars once again, the energy in the air, weaving around her like a thread, tugging her towards something she couldn't fully see, but could feel. The earth beneath her seemed to respond, its vibrations deepening, matching the rhythm of her own heart. She felt the connection, like a thread tying her to Rowan, to the earth, to the stars themselves. And as she focused, she could feel it. She could feel the power of the stars flowing through her, filling her, connecting her to the source of everything. Hold on. Rowan's voice was barely a whisper now, the strain in it evident. We're almost there. You must hold on to the connection. If you break it, everything will be lost. Alara's fingers clenched around his, her grip tight with determination. She couldn't break it. She couldn't let him down. Not when everything was at stake. The stars above them began to flicker more brightly, their light growing stronger, pushing back against the darkness that had threatened to swallow them whole. Rowan's power was awakening, but so was hers. The bond between them was growing, feeding off the energy they had tapped into, feeding off the strength she had found within herself. With each passing second, the stars grew brighter, their light illuminating the clearing in a soft, ethereal glow. The hum of the earth grew louder, more intense, until it filled Alara's very being. She could feel it now, the power that had once been lost, returning. She was doing this. They were doing this. The stars were coming back to life. The bond between them pulsed with power, a steady rhythm that matched her own heartbeat. She was part of something bigger now, something ancient and powerful. The power of the stars, the power of the earth, and the power of the bond they shared. It was all connected. The world around them seemed to shift, the darkness that had once threatened to consume them giving way to the light of the stars, the source of all life. Rowan's grip on her hand tightened, his silver eyes glowing brighter than ever before as he met her gaze. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with awe and wonder. Alara smiled, the exhaustion of the moment weighing heavily on her, but the relief, the joy, it washed over her like a wave. They had done it. Together, they had restored the stars. Together, they had saved the world. Rowan's lips curved into a smile, the weight of his years of struggle lifting from his shoulders. For the first time, he looked truly free. The curse that had bound him, the fading stars that had drained him, were no more. They had returned. And with them, so had he. Alara felt the connection between them stronger than ever. The bond that had begun in the dark of the forest now a bright and unbreakable thread that tied their fates together. She wasn't just the Omega anymore. She was the one who had saved him. She was the one who had saved the stars. And as they stood there, in the center of the clearing, bathed in the soft glow of the returning stars, Alara realized something she hadn't before. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Alara stood with Rowan, her heart racing as she felt the energy around them intensify. The earth beneath her feet seemed to hum with life, the very ground pulsing in rhythm with her own heartbeat. She had agreed. She had chosen to trust him, to bind herself to him and the fate that awaited them both. The stars above them flickered weakly, but there was a spark of something new, a flicker of hope, beginning to glow within the vast emptiness of the sky. Rowan's hand, still warm in hers, was steady despite the overwhelming weight of the moment. He had been the Alpha King, a ruler bound to the stars and the power they held. Now, he was a shadow of that power, a fading king who had placed his trust in her, the Omega who had never been given a second glance by anyone in her life. And yet, here they were, bound together in a way that neither of them fully understood. "Are you ready?" Rowan's voice broke through the silence. His gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that seemed to see through her. Alara nodded, her breath steadying as she squeezed his hand. "Yes," she whispered, the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest, but she didn't falter. She was ready. The moment she spoke, the ground beneath them trembled. A soft, vibrating hum filled the air, and Alara could feel it deep in her bones. It was the same sensation she had felt earlier, when the stars had begun to fade, when the power between them had first awakened. This time, it was different. The energy was stronger, more alive, more intense. Rowan closed his eyes, his face a mask of concentration as he reached out with his other hand, his fingers brushing the earth beneath them. "Focus," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "We must connect with the source. We must restore the balance." Alara followed his lead, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. She felt the pull of the stars once again, the energy in the air weaving around her like a thread, tugging her towards something she couldn't fully see, but could feel. The earth beneath her seemed to respond, its vibrations deepening, matching the rhythm of her own heart. She felt the connection, like a thread tying her to Rowan, to the earth, to the stars themselves. And as she focused, she could feel it. She could feel the power of the stars flowing through her, filling her, connecting her to the source of everything. "Hold on." Rowan's voice was barely a whisper now, the strain in it evident. "We're almost there. You must hold on to the connection. If you break it, everything will be lost." Alara's fingers clenched around his, her grip tight with determination. She couldn't break it. She couldn't let him down. Not when everything was at stake. The stars above them began to flicker more brightly, their light growing stronger, pushing back against the darkness that had threatened to swallow them whole. Rowan's power was awakening, but so was hers. The bond between them was growing, feeding off the energy they had tapped into, feeding off the strength she had found within herself. With each passing second, the stars grew brighter, their light illuminating the clearing in a soft, ethereal glow. The hum of the earth grew louder, more intense, until it filled Alara's very being. She could feel it now, the power that had once been lost, returning. She was doing this. They were doing this. The stars were coming back to life. The bond between them pulsed with power, a steady rhythm that matched her own heartbeat. She was part of something bigger now, something ancient and powerful. The power of the stars, the power of the earth, and the power of the bond they shared. It was all connected. The world around them seemed to shift, the darkness that had once threatened to consume them giving way to the light of the stars, the source of all life. Rowan's grip on her hand tightened, his silver eyes glowing brighter than ever before as he met her gaze. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with awe and wonder. Alara smiled, the exhaustion of the moment weighing heavily on her, but the relief, the joy, it washed over her like a wave. They had done it. Together, they had restored the stars. Together, they had saved the world. Rowan's lips curved into a smile, the weight of his years of struggle lifting from his shoulders. For the first time, he looked truly free. The curse that had bound him, the fading stars that had drained him, were no more. They had returned. And with them, so had he. Alara felt the connection between them stronger than ever. The bond that had begun in the dark of the forest now a bright and unbreakable thread that tied their fates together. She wasn't just the Omega anymore. She was the one who had saved him. She was the one who had saved the stars. And as they stood there, in the center of the clearing, bathed in the soft glow of the returning stars, Alara realized something she hadn't before. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The stars above them were brighter than ever, their light now steady and strong, but Alara could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The connection between her and Rowan was undeniable, a force stronger than anything she had ever experienced. As the night air filled her lungs, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The world felt different now, as if it had shifted on its axis, and Alara was no longer the girl who had been lost in the shadows. She was someone else now, someone who had played a part in restoring the very essence of life itself. Rowan stood beside her, his presence a quiet strength. His silver eyes glowed softly, a reflection of the stars that had returned, their light mirroring the power that now flowed through him. He had been the king, the ruler of the north, but now he was something else, a man who had found a new purpose, a new beginning. Alara turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "What happens now?" she asked, her heart still racing. Rowan looked at her, the corner of his lips curving upward in a smile that was filled with both relief and gratitude. "Now," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion, "we rebuild." Alara nodded, feeling the weight of those words sink in. Rebuild. It was more than just restoring the stars or the balance of power. It was about rebuilding everything that had been lost, the hope, the trust, and the bond between them all. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. They had done the impossible. They had brought the stars back, and in doing so, They had opened a new chapter in their lives. I never thought I would be part of something like this, Alera admitted, her voice soft as she glanced at the sky. I never thought I would be the one to save the stars. Rowan's gaze softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. You didn't just save the stars, Alera, he said quietly. You saved me. You saved all of us. The words hung in the air between them, powerful and sincere. Alera could feel the truth in them, and for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be seen, to be valued for more than just what others expected of her. She wasn't just the Omega anymore. She was a part of something bigger, something that could change the course of their world. Together, they would rebuild. Together, they would restore what had been lost, not just for themselves, but for every wolf who had ever been forgotten or cast aside. The stars above them continued to shine, their light a reminder of the power they had unlocked, the future they had forged. As Alera looked up at the sky, she couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. There was so much more ahead of them, so much more to discover. And whatever came next, she knew she wouldn't be facing it alone. Rowan was by her side, and together, they would face whatever challenges the future held. The night was calm now, the stars shining brightly above them. But Alera knew that the true journey was just beginning. She had found her place, her purpose, and she would never let go of it again. The days that followed were filled with change, though the world around Alera and Rowan remained the same. The stars above still burned brightly, their light now steady and full of life. But it was the unseen, the invisible shift between them that had transformed everything. Rowan had been the Alpha King, a man bound to the fate of the stars, his power tethered to the sky. But now, they were both free, unbound by the ancient forces that had controlled them. The air between them was filled with something new, something they had both unknowingly longed for. Alera stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the stars glitter above them. It felt strange, comforting even, to know that the stars were no longer fading. The weight that had pressed on her chest since the moment she had found Rowan was gone, replaced with a sense of peace. It's incredible, she said quietly, her voice full of wonder as she gazed up at the sky. Rowan stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. He nodded, his eyes soft as he watched the same stars that had once betrayed him, now shining like beacons of hope. It is, he agreed, his voice low and filled with a quiet gratitude. I never thought I would see the stars return, and I never imagined I would find someone who could help me bring them back. Alera turned to face him, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. The connection between them had only deepened since that night in the clearing. It wasn't just a bond forged by fate. It was a bond they had both chosen to embrace, to nurture. And in doing so, they had created something stronger than either of them had ever known. You don't have to thank me, she said, her voice soft but firm. I didn't do this alone. We did this together. Rowan's gaze softened, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Still, I couldn't have done it without you. I've spent so many years trapped in the past, chained to a destiny I couldn't control. But now, he paused, his voice trailing off as if the words were too much to say aloud. Now, I'm free, he finished quietly. Alera's heart ached at the truth in his words. She had never known what it felt like to be trapped in a world where you had no control, no say in your future. But she understood now. She understood what it meant to break free from the chains that held you down, to reclaim your power and your purpose. We're both free, she whispered, her eyes locked with his. We're free to choose our own path now. Rowan's eyes sparkled with something new, something Alera hadn't seen before. Hope, determination. And we will, he said, his voice strong and resolute. Together, we will choose our future. Alera felt the truth of his words resonate deep within her. She was no longer the Omega who had been cast aside, forgotten by the world. She was a part of something bigger now, something that had the power to change everything. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. Whatever came next, she would face it with Rowan by her side. The stars had returned, and so had they. Together, they had restored the balance. Together, they would rebuild. Rowan took her hand in his grip warm and sure. The world around them was still, the only sound the whisper of the wind through the trees. But in that moment, in the quiet of the night, Alera felt something stir within her, something that had been dormant for so long. It was the beginning of something new. The beginning of their future. And it was only just the start.